When you heard the work report from Premier Li Keqiang, what were the areas that you focused on, and was there anything unexpected?
Well, I'm pretty surprised to see they have a huge coverage of what they would do to the SME, because that would be something that people have been asking for a long time, getting some relief from the government, some tax relief, some fee release, and a better loan environment so they can actually advance the business. But I was not expecting something to that major scale. And also it's very specific, it goes to the number. It's like the reduction of the tax for construction companies would go to, from certain percent and drop 3%. And also, for other business, they have specific numbers. And for example, for the small qualified people, which they call it for the, it's like the small businessman, the monthly income of $30,000 was the limit before. Now it's raised to $100,000. That's a lot of money, for a small businessman. It's a single person company. You're talking about over $1 million, net worth that is tax-free. For China, it's a huge boost. And so I think the measures they put forth, to overcome the business landscape has been really, really substantial. And they go across the board as well, they have specific numbers even for, state-owned banks. They have to increase the loan 30% for SMEs. And for small banks, for the amount that they can free up from the government's regulation, they have to all invest in the SME, and they cannot divert to anything else. And I think I haven't seen that before. It's like a a playbook. You just follow the rule. You do what has to be said, and you do what has to be done. And it is something that is really, really touch the heart of many, many businessmen. And in the past, they have good emphasis on the workers. Now it changed the scope, including the SME, the business people. So now, this is becoming a more level field for the local businessman, small businessman, and I think it's a tremendous good news for the people.
Is there not a danger in this? Because for the last 2 years, controlling financial risk has been top of the agenda. Controlling risk is the first of the 3 big battles that President Xi Jinping talks about, and banks are under pressure for non-performing loans, and they're involved in supply-side structural reform and deleveraging on the one hand. Now on the other hand, the banks are being told they have to increase their lending to more risky companies. Sounds like a little bit of a contradiction, no?
Yeah, to some extent, you can always say there's always a risk, when you open up something. But I think if you continue to be very cautious, they also run a risk of, stifling, all of the investments. And China cannot stand that, especially, if the trade environment, internationally, just stimulating the local consumer business. And this kind of sector has to be fostered. You have to take a risk. But that risk, I think, is very manageable because, already they have, the loan structures, bond structures that probably can help alleviate, the pressure that's on the bank. And hopefully, we have a bigger picture to diversify the risk. And in some sense, when everybody's making money, everybody's, putting in, chipping in the economy, what may not be a good picture can become a very pleasant picture for everybody to see. So I think, the China miracle, in some sense, it could be another facet that you can see, and of course, it cannot go against, conventional wisdom, but sometimes it does surprise people.
So that's good. In the work report, was there anything that you might have liked to have seen emphasized more that was not covered as well as you might think?
Well, actually, I think for the recognition of the science people's contribution, because the tax and all these things doesn't go to the science people too much, but of course, there's some mention of how the science people and technology people would have some tax, relief. But certainly, I think this is a very major part of the future economy, and by putting in lots of investment in the cutting edge research would help us sometime down the line. And I think the report can actually put much more into it. And so also I suggest in the report that maybe for CAS they should have some specific mention of it, because there's been a good association that's been promoting the science and technology popularization. And it's only the unions been mentioned, the women's associations been mentioned, and I think it's time, when we are saying science and technologies are important, the associations that are associated with it should also be recognized in some way. And I think this is something I already suggested the report should add in a clause or two.